Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It's a beautiful, crisp, cold winter's night, so I appreciate everybody coming out of their lovely warm homes. I'd like to acknowledge that the Macedon Ranges Shire Council is located on the lands and waterways of the Djadjarawang, Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and Taungurung people, who are the traditional owners and custodians of the lands and waterways. I recognise their living cultures and ongoing connection to country, and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here tonight. Tonight I acknowledge we're meeting on the land of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people. I'd like to acknowledge that we do have two members from VCC in attendance if anyone feels like they need to have a bit of a chat afterwards or during our session tonight. Severe weather events have affected Eastern Australia over the last 6 months and have impacted Macedon Ranges communities, with extreme weather events occurring from Christmas Eve, Christmas Day and through into January this year. On top of other storm, flood and pandemic-related impacts of the last few years, the ongoing lingering effects of these emergencies continue. Our kids are not immune to feeling all the feelings from the trauma of those events. Whilst we as a community, we work hard to be resilient and supportive to everybody in the face of diversity and disasters. How have these events, one on top of the other, impacted our children? We acknowledge that these particular events have been felt by us all in differing ways. There's also the stress and devastation that we don't always share with our neighbours: illnesses, job losses, family breakdowns, and kids finding it difficult just to readjust after so much interruption. Australian communities have a reputation of getting on with it, but even the most resilient of communities and households can underestimate the impacts on natural disasters on our children. Michelle Roberts joins us tonight. Michelle is a psychologist, teacher and child disaster expert, consultant. We're here for a conversation about the impacts of disaster and community trauma on children and families, and how we can best support the recovery after an emergency or disaster. Michelle will discuss the psychosocial impacts and needs of children following a disaster, and how school communities, community groups, families can all work together to help prioritise and support those children's needs. Michelle has years of experience as an educator and psychologist supporting school communities, and is the co-chair of the National Infant and Child Disaster Mental Health Committee. Thank you all again for joining us tonight, and I'd like to welcome Michelle Roberts.
Thanks, Leah. Welcome tonight, and I'm so pleased to see that there's a level of interest in the Macedon Ranges around how we can support infants, children and families in a disaster context. And as Leah indicated, in the Macedon Ranges, we have had our fair share of very significant disasters. And if I think about my own history, my first week of teaching as a first-year out teacher was at Gisborne Secondary College. It was Gisborne High Tech. Then the week of the Ash Wednesday bushfires. And that set me on my course, I believe, of what has been 42 years now of working in this space one way or another. So a teacher at Gisborne, first year out, I wasn't sure whether or not what I was seeing in the classroom was a consequence of me being an inexperienced teacher, or whether there was some sort of impact on the kids of the experience of those Ash Wednesday bushfires. Now we know, of course, kids experience the disaster in a range of ways, and it can have adverse or negative impacts on their well-being, their growth and their development. Back in 1983, we had barely thought about impacts on mental health for adults. And if you've heard Rob Gordon speak, you'll know that Rob refers to his time as beginning his work with Ash Wednesday. I'll stand very still and not move so that my microphone doesn't make noises if I can. So it was in the second week of the Ash Wednesday post-bushfire situation that I met Rob. And Rob and a woman named Ruth Wraith, who was a psychotherapist and had a real child passion, mentored me as the wellbeing person at Gisborne Secondary. So not bad for the second week of my whole teaching career. I was helping the school with their recovery program. They knew that I had a background in psychology at that point. I hadn't finished my degree. But it meant that I suppose I was more observant than some of my colleagues who didn't have that understanding of what we know or knew at that time around the impact of disastrous events. There are certainly people back then, and there's people now, who tell me that infants and children are unaware of a disaster. They're resilient, they don't know what's going on, we'll just get them back to routine. I'm not sure why they're behaving like that, they never used to do that. So I always start with encouraging people to ask the questions of the child. Children are an authority of their own inner world. They're the ones who'll tell you, I actually feel nervous in my tummy, I've got butterflies, I'm not feeling well, I've got a headache. Children as young as newborn infants experience a sense of loss of safety, loss of predictability. You think about little tiny babies and how they respond to faces. They are hardwired in their brain to read when risk is there. And if you're a person who is parenting that child and you've been through the disaster and you're feeling distressed and upset and frightened, or you're in the middle of the disaster and you grab your child and run or evacuate quickly or whatever, that tiny little human being is going to know not everything's right at the moment. Toddlers know because they get even better at reading the situation and they know things are out of whack. This isn't how things happen. Where's Dad gone? Where's Mum? What's happening? How do I know I'm safe? Let me just hang on to your leg all the time, Mum, because I don't want you going anywhere. Toddlers can tell you, I felt really scared. When the sky got dark and I saw the fire coming, I was scared. They can play it out. And in the room we've got not only parents, but we've got educators, and as educators you've probably seen a lot of that behaviour when we've had storms, floods or fires, let alone some of the mass casualty events that Australia has experienced, like the Bondi stabbings or like the Bourke Street Mall incidents or any of those other things that we see mainly through social media, but some of our children experience directly. So what I'm wanting to do tonight is not to stand up here and tell you all the things that I've learnt in my 40 plus years of doing this work, but to look at the wisdom within the room, and there is a lot of wisdom in the room, and to start to ask some questions around, I'm wondering about this, I came tonight because I've got this burning question, or I came tonight because I've got some expertise in this area and I wanted to hear what you had to say, but I want to share what I know and what I've found working. Because I've got a lot of experience of working on the ground in a range of different disasters, locally, nationally, internationally, I can pull on examples of what I've seen of good practice, and maybe that will be of assistance to you in your thinking about how you support the infants, children, young people, families and colleagues. Because often when you're working in an education area, there's a sort of sense of a need to support your colleagues to do the best by your community, your education community as well. After the 2009 bushfires, the Black Saturday bushfires, I did a lot of work in schools around the state. And I did a lot of work with the educators. And I came into a number of schools about 6 months after the fires had been. People were still trying to recover. They were in temporary housing. They were still jittery and anxious. The kids were still really flighty. There were the quiet ones in the corners and the ones that were acting out all the time and difficult to manage their behaviour. And when I got the staff together and we began to talk about the fires, people spontaneously, the teachers spontaneously started to talk about their own personal experiences of the fires. And they told the story of that day, and their co-teacher that they actually taught the grade with together hadn't necessarily known what their experience had been that day, because they had all come back to teaching quite quickly, because it's a common belief that the sooner we get schools up and running, the better, because kids need routine and predictability. But parents need space to manage the physical recovery component of ringing the insurance company, clearing away the block, getting a house or getting a roof over your head, finding the money to buy the food, managing day-to-day recovery in a practical sense. What we learned was that the teachers really struggled to cope with their own responses to the disaster, and then with the children who were similarly affected by the disaster. And so what we recommend now is that there's a little lag period where we do some work with the teachers and we assist them in their own understanding of the experience, and then with strategies on how to keep themselves safe in the classroom and to support their children with their psychological safety. So our knowledge is growing. With each event, we learn more things about what's good practice, what worked, what didn't work, what we recommend and what we don't recommend. So I'm really interested to know what your first name is and what it is that you hope to get out of today. Would you mind starting?
Hello, I'm Sarah. I'm a teacher as well, a primary school teacher. I've just finished my Masters in Learning Intervention. So I'm here looking at disaster and how it impacts learning, I guess.
So have you read much of the research in that area?
No.
There's a whole world waiting for you.
I understand that trauma impacts learning, and it can, recircuit the brain. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a really good starting point, because parents will often say to me that they see a drop in their child's cognitive ability, their ability to think about lots of things at the same time, and they experience that themselves. I was part of a study at Melbourne University after the Black Saturday fires. I was working in the Department of Education, and my job was the recovery manager for the state of Victoria in that role. And we knew that learning was impacted, but we couldn't find any solid evidence or research that would inform us to inform schools about how they could support kids so that they didn't lose that learning trajectory. We used the NAPLAN data, and we tracked the littlies that came in over the period of NAPLAN. Where we saw the gaps in their learning at that stage was in the use of working memory. And working memory, we know, where you hold an idea in mind and you can manipulate it, like do your maths, add, take away, but holding the number in mind, for example, is severely affected by an exposure to a significantly potentially traumatic event. And what we found was that reading and numeracy came out as, well, they're key areas, but came out as affected. And that was because of the working memory component of it. Those children were revisited after 10 years, and we looked again at their NAPLAN scores, and that deficit stayed for a long time, but some were able to make up ground with the additional support. And you would have noticed after COVID, the Victorian Education Department brought in tutors in schools as a learning from the 2009 fires, as maybe if we put some more small group targeted intervention, that we can make up for the struggles that those kids are having. Some of the parents, when we talked to them about the learning problems, said, you know what, Michelle, I get that because I still go to the supermarket and I can't remember what I was going to buy. I can't sequence how to make a sandwich anymore. I can't remember what comes first. That's bizarre, isn't it? Everyone knows how to make a sandwich, but I find myself with the bread and then I'm thinking, what do I do next? So the brain is certainly affected by that fight, flight, freeze, and the consequences of the neurotransmitter changes that we get, the adrenaline, the cortisol, the anxiety, the jumpiness, the hyper alertness of looking at what's coming. And it means that we find it very hard to pay attention, to use our short-term memory in an effective way, to manipulate ideas in our head at the same time. So I'm really very, very chuffed that you're in the room tonight, and encourage you to have a look at that piece of research that we did. It's Gibbs, Lisa Gibbs is the key author, and you'll see there's a whole cascade of other research after that. And should you want to follow that up, give me a call. Yeah, so thank you.
Hi, I'm Deb. I'm a teacher also. In 1983, I was the teacher at Gisborne Primary. My children went to Mount Macedon. We went through the fires, we know. And they were 2 and 6 at that time. So you're really bringing back things that are applicable.
Yeah.
Thank you. But I've done, work with, even with I'm a kindergarten teacher now, so I work with the littlies, but just how much their security helps with their learning. So I'm just here to refresh. I've done a lot of trauma, but refresh all that stuff.
So that notion of psychological safety is really important, and we can't learn, we can't function well if we don't feel safe. If we're looking over our shoulder every second, we're not in the moment, we're not learning, we're not coping. I'm glad that you explained your experience of Ash Wednesday just a little bit, and that's great, because this is a community that has experienced trauma. A lot of our helpers have had that experience and probably, I would predict, carry a sensitivity for the rest of their life around subsequent disasters. There is a chance that some of the conversation tonight might make you feel a bit triggered and a bit upset, and that's why we've got our beautiful Council of Churches people here to provide you with some personal support. I know Leah spoke about VCC, and we're really good at acronyms in this world. And if you didn't know what VCC, it's the Victorian Council of Churches. These are people who have done training around personal support. You can talk about your own roles, I'm sure, but I just wanted to make sure people understood that, you know, you have training, you are here around personal support, you've got experience in a disaster context, is my hunch, and I certainly have encountered you in meetings related to emergency management and planning and so on. So tell us about you.
My name's Peter, and I'm a volunteer with the Victorian Council of Churches, Emergency Ministry. I guess the term emergency, covers all sorts of things, fires and floods and so on. And I've been volunteering now for 10, 12 years. So we've seen communities through quite a few ordeals. I guess our contact with communities is at the time when there's an evacuation on. We have a role to play at the centre where people are evacuated to. We'll also be used by councils in the recovery mode, so when the danger has passed and people are trying to get back on their feet, and they set up a centre for people to go to check out their sewerage and things, the multitude of problems, fencing and so on. And we have a role to play there. And also down the track, some councils will do a follow-up where you actually go out and visit people 6 months later to see what the issues are ongoing. So we do training fairly regularly. We have to keep updated every 2 years. And we've also, I was a school teacher as well. Our first children were born in the middle of a flood, and 1974 floods. So I can still remember driving the Volkswagen through floodwater to get to Goulburn Base Hospital to get plasma for Gay, who was in the Bush Nursing Hospital at Nathalia. So we've had these issues. But our experience has been mainly with floods, both fast and slow, on a personal level. So,
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
And my name's Gay, and much the same as Peter. But when we've been in relief centres in particular, we often come across families that turn up, and our training doesn't cover really caring for children in that situation. And it's best, well, we've always thought it would be best if the children are still around their parents, but often the parents are so stressed and the kids are so wild, we don't know what to do. It's quite challenging in those situations. One particular place we went to, it was Sale, the bushfires at Sale, and several groups came in and had craft activities and plays and things that they would engage the kids with, and we thought that was wonderful because it gave the parents a little bit of a break. But so I'm really happy that this is being addressed in the local area, in our region.
Yeah, I agree. And you've answered a question that I was going to come back to Peter and ask, which was, do you just work in your local area, or do you work across Victoria? It sounds like across Victoria. And would you say that the training that you receive is in psychological first aid?
It is psychological first aid, yes.
Yes, yeah. And so there are core components to what we call psychological first aid. It's a very well-known, well-regarded, well-used first-level intervention. So it's called a universal intervention because you can assist anyone who is looking for support with it. You don't have to think they're really affected, I need to talk to them. It's just a manner of talking with people, making sure they're physically and psychologically safe, showing care, compassion, communication, connection. We talk about the C's when we talk about it. Would you add something more to explain what psychological first aid is? Did I miss something?
I think you've done it pretty well. And I can't think, there's a lot more, but
So it's actually a model that we use mainly with adults, but we're now shifting it down to find it's really quite effective with children as well, and quite safe to use for children because it's actually just good common sense and good human interaction. And when I do PFA, psychological first aid with children, I'm not poking them to tell me, what did you see, what did you hear, how are you feeling, what are you thinking about that? I'm listening. And I'm listening really, really carefully. And as educators, you would have heard the term and used it probably yourself around full body listening, you know, and that's what you have to do when you're talking with someone who's been through or is going through a terrible experience, is you have to read the body language as well as what the words are. And we often find it really effective to talk about feelings before thinking, because when you're in a crisis state, that thinking's not quite where it used to be and where it'll get back to, hopefully, but you've got a whole flood of feelings that are big feelings or overwhelming feelings, and you don't feel safe. And my core job in that circumstance is to help that young person, that child, feel and be safe first, because I can't do anything magically psychologically to them when they're not feeling safe, just as we talked about children not learning particularly well when they don't feel safe. So also the other thing I was thinking about, Gay, when you were talking about children in relief centres and recovery centres, it's a gap. It's a gap that some councils do better than others. Some organisations do better than others. I've heard absolutely horrific stories of kids being exposed to things that they didn't need or want to be exposed to in what was meant to be the safe place of a relief centre. Kids want to know where their parents are. Parents want to know where their kids are when there's that sort of crisis happening. But to give children age-appropriate opportunities to play, to do something creative, to play video games in a corner, whatever, to not have the big TVs on showing the fire outside, that's not helpful, on repeat over and over again, to not be exposed to high levels of distress in other people, and sometimes that's impossible to do anything about, but you help to soothe the child if they're distressed by that, because we always want to bring that arousal level back down. The longer everyone's in a high aroused state, the harder it is for them to recover well as we would hope. So the thing I look to do is to bring a level of calm back to the room, and we teachers are very good at that. You know, we're good at dealing with lots and bringing it back, and how we do that is by being calm ourselves, co-regulation. So if I'm feeling all churned up and anxious and I'm in a relief centre and I'm meant to be working with this group of 8-year-olds that are hanging off the ceiling at the moment, if I'm hanging off the ceiling too, I'm of no help to them. So regulating myself, doing my calming activities, and then being able to talk in a calm, reassuring, safe way with that group of children will talk directly to their brain with my calm voice, and will start to bring their arousal levels down. So calm voice, reassurance, the things that you already know, activities, not ones that are going to razz them up because they're already razzed up. And, you know, I've seen some people come into work with kids and have had them hanging off the ceiling again in 5 seconds when I've just got them calm. So you need to think about what your interactions are going to be with them and how you can support them, but in a way that they can still see their carers and carers can see them. because no one tolerates separation. Separation of children in a disaster is really interesting. We used to think that it was really helpful to send them to nanas so that they were safe, or to send them to Auntie Jo or whatever so that you could get on with the busy work of recovery or get your own emotional act together. The evidence is showing that separation of children from their family is not helpful. They have poorer outcomes. Now, that's a really tricky one to say to parents, because I don't know about your emergency management plan, but I have left my son with my mother while I've gone to do this work. And now I stand up and say, geez, that was a bad idea, Michelle, you know. Say to my son, who's now 31, how did you feel about that? You know, I was really worried about you and Dad. Because at that period of time with the Black Saturday fires, we were both working at the international school in Kilmore. And if you remember, the fires started 1 kilometre from that school. So we had to rush over to the school in our teaching roles. And I was a psych at the school, but we left our son behind. With Cyclone Tracy, all those years ago, that's where the original research was done, when the kids were sent out and away from where the danger was, where the damage was, and those kids just kept on wondering, how is everyone? Is it safe? What's happened to my bedroom? Where am I going to be? Have we got a house still? And you know, if you don't know the answers to things that are important questions, what do? You catastrophise it. It gets worse and worse, and you go down every possible worst case scenario, don't you? Yeah. So in saying to parents to try and keep their kids with them, I'm not asking you to jeopardise their safety at all. You know, if it's you're going to die if you stay here sort of scenario, then you're not here. I do ask that you include children in the conversations around your planning, and I do ask that you plan. Know what you're going to do, have your plan and have a plan B. Sit around the table and say, what's our family household's emergency plan? Listen to the kids and what they say, because they'll have insights that you haven't thought about, or they'll have strategies that you think, oh, didn't think about that, that's brilliant. Practice it. I don't know if anyone remembers the ABC did a show where they got families to practice evacuation. It was a New South Wales-based show, but shown nationally. And they actually timed families enacting the plan that they had decided was going to be their household plan, and they found that it wasn't doable. This one kid, I remember, wanted to take his great racing bike, and there was nowhere to put it in the car and have everyone else in the car at the same time. So in the heat of the moment, he had to leave his racing bike behind, for example. So talk to kids about it. Kids do better when they've had a chance to think about the what-ifs, and that you've talked with them around, here are some ideas. I thought we could do this. I thought we'd leave early. I thought we would make sure we've got a crate for the dog, and the dog will go here. Or we'll put the dog in the boot until we get to where we're going, and then we'll put the dog in the crate so the dog's safe. All of those sorts of things, because the more you practice it in your head, and this is the same for children, the better decisions you make in the heat of the moment, the less anxious you're likely to be. And having a sense of, I knew what to do, I had a go, takes away that thing of being helpless, hopeless and overwhelmed a bit. Disasters by nature are chaotic and overwhelming, but to think that I knew what I was going to do. You know, I've had 3-year-olds say to me, my job was to roll the towels and put them at the bottom of the door. I did my job really well. I helped my family stay safe. Not in those words and not as lucid as that, but that was the gist of it. That little kid knew that they had been effective. It's a part of the machinery of the family managing a challenging event. We always see in the research children are uniquely vulnerable, and it annoys me. It annoys me because we don't unpack why they're uniquely vulnerable. They are vulnerable because of their size, their dependence on adults to help them, their stage of development. They're much more receptive to the hormones that come with threat and adversity, and it can change the way their brain wires, as you said. We can repair a lot, but we can't fix everything. You know, your memory of being in the Volkswagen in the floodwater with the plasma, you know, you've still got that memory so strong, you know, and what are we talking about, 40 years ago? 50 years ago. So we know that memories that are potentially traumatic, and I keep on saying potentially because what's traumatic for you may not be traumatic for me. Memories that are encoded in the heat of the moment of an adversity and a challenge are encoded differently in our brain. And we can hold them very tightly, or we can not remember them at all. There's a famous researcher who talks about the fact that it's a paradox of traumatic memory, that we either remember too much or not enough. And I see that range of responses in people, and it can have these two people in the same experience, and one has this recollection and one has that recollection, and they're your individual recollections. Children are exactly the same. So
I actually work in the emergency management space, so that's why I'm here. Probably tasked fairly soon with helping to write the relief and recovery sub-plan. So all information is good.
that's a big responsibility, isn't it?
Yes.
It is.
Yes. Yeah.
So in your plan, have you already been thinking about children and infants?
So at this stage, I'm working on the MEMP, the Municipal Emergency Management Plan, and that's not specific to age groups or anything. It's a sort of more oversight. But when we drill down into relief and recovery, then I'm sure there will be. And that's, I suppose, why I'm here, to be able to add some value in that space and to make some suggestions.
Okay, that's really good to hear. And you're probably aware there's a member of our community, Susan Davies, who a long time ago did a piece of research where she looked at local governments' emergency management plans, and she found that animals were mentioned more times than children in the plans. And that gets trotted out all the time because it hasn't changed across Australia as much as we would hope. And so we find ourselves, I'm the annoying person in all these meetings who will say, what about the kids? Don't forget what about the pregnant mums? What about the, expectant dads? Because there are periods in your life where you are more vulnerable. And we need to make sure when we think about risk and hazard that we identify our most vulnerable groups as well as the general population. And although I hate thinking about children are uniquely vulnerable, we do need to plan specifically around infants and children and young people and the elderly that can't get themselves out of their homes safely and all of those groups. But there's so much that we can do around children. So there's this wonderful program being run by a woman named Bryony Towers, and it's called Disaster Resilience Education, or Child-Centred Disaster Risk Reduction Programs. She's been working with grades 5s and 6s, and she teaches them about bushfire and where the risk is, understand the fire, how to manage if there's a threat from fire. The kids are on the school's emergency management planning committee. They help in the community to develop the plan. They go home and get their parents organised often around what the household plan is. When you ask those kids, how did you feel about that? What did you learn? Was it valuable? And I've done this sort of program myself with children around giving CPR. They'll say, I was really scared before because I didn't know what I had to do or what I could do. Now I know I'm not as scared. I'll do this and then I'll get help from an adult. I'll do that, and if I need help. So it not only improves their own sense of competency, realistically, not I'm going to go out and stop the fire sort of stuff, but it also means that we have children as educators within the community, which is a wonderful thing, a wonderful, respectful thing that we'd like to encourage, because, of course, United Nations Convention of the Child says they have a right to be a part of the decisions that affect them, and we're a signatory to that. So it's good practice. So welcome to have you knock on my door if you want to have a conversation when you get to the infants, children, families section.
Hi, I'm Felicity. I'm a kindergarten teacher as well. And I guess I wanted to come tonight because the children at kindergarten at the moment, certainly the ones I'm seeing, presumably the trauma was COVID, but they're all very heightened all the time. And even something as simple as moving to a galley kitchen with the door open into the classroom, some of them won't enter it. We've got many children who cry for long periods of time. Small changes in the day can cause massive meltdowns. we just did a fire evacuation, and I videoed myself walking down the path to the end of the path, showed them the sign, walked back, showed them the video before we did it, because otherwise I would have had 4 or 5 children who wouldn't come. And when I say wouldn't, they're
Couldn't.
big enough to not come.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like they're all so vulnerable at the moment and so heightened that a flood, a fire, any of what we previously would have called the big traumas is going to tip them over the edge. They're already so close to the edge. That's what I wanted to learn about tonight.
Okay. So pandemic is a really interesting phenomenon to consider, and of course we didn't have a lot of practice at dealing with pandemics here in Australia. There had been a sense for a long time that we were going to have a pandemic at some stage, and the World Health Organisation was busy sending out to various countries saying, get your pandemic plan up to speed. And of course, here in Victoria, we had significant lockdowns, and if that meant that children were hothoused at home. They didn't go through the normal developmental process of tiered separation, you know, off to nanas, off to early learning centre, off to kinder. There was a bit more laxness, I guess, and perhaps that's not the best word to be using, but there was a greater tolerance for kids being little kids for a time, because mums and dads had time to be with the kids and they didn't have the same need to push them through toilet training and move them through. So the ground rules change for all of us. And we're seeing in schools, and all of the educators and parents as well, I'm sure, are seeing that there's been some regression in kids. You know, the kids that you knew in grade 4 who were cruising through grade 4 and doing okay aren't doing so well in year 7, for example. You know, my husband is a teacher and he spoke about his year 12 cohort, and, you know, they left school somewhere along year 9 and they came back and they were year 12s, and they weren't really year 12s, they were still year 9s. You know, they just didn't have the knowledge, the skills and the opportunity to grow and develop that they would have if they'd just kept on going to school and with their peers. Lockdown suited some kids really well. You know, they worked better independently, not in a class, they were self-motivated or not. And what we are seeing is the same responses that I would say we see after any other disaster, because pandemic was a disaster for a lot of people. So disaster's a really interesting term. We often use the term natural disaster. That's changing. We don't use natural disaster any longer, because it's the hazard and then the consequence of the hazard can be the disaster. Now, we were talking about Hurricane Katrina before, and Hurricane Katrina is like, in my mind, the best example of where it went seriously wrong after the disaster. A lot of the harm to people in that event, those who survived it, was the recovery wasn't managed as well as it could have been initially. They did lots of great catch-up later on, but a lot of harm was done, I believe. So stop using the term, if you can, natural disaster. Talk about disaster. Know that there can be hazardous events that aren't disasters. They're well managed. People will say, geez, that was scary, that was overwhelming, but I'm okay. Just to say, use the term potentially traumatic, because what's traumatic to you isn't to me, or vice versa. You know, there's a whole range of ingredients that go on to make something a traumatic event for a person, and part of it's my individual approach to it as well as the factors of the event. So, any problems with that or any questions? No? Okay.
We're both here, we've got 2 kids, and our daughter in particular is quite anxious, and we just thought it might be a good idea to come improve our knowledge and hopefully be able to help both of them, but her in particular, with things that are causing her anxiety.
So are you hearing anything in the general chat so far that you can apply to parenting a child with anxiety? You can say no, that's okay.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet, yeah.
Not me, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So let me try and make the connection, because we're focusing significantly on disaster-induced anxiety. When we look at what are the mental health conditions, so we've gone past this was really stressful to, oh, this is doing me harm. Mentally, I'm not coping with this at all, and I'm going on to develop a problem around this. The most common things we see in children and young people: depression, anxiety, a lot of change in whether they're super independent or really clingy, so that developmental change occurs, and post-traumatic stress responses, which is not quite at the threshold of post-traumatic stress disorder, but really struggle with lots of intrusive thoughts, memories, anxiety, heart racing, going back to thinking about it a lot and not being able to concentrate on other things, sometimes having dreams about it, or be sitting in the classroom and feel like you're in it again. And then it can become post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a really difficult thing and a horrible thing for young people to have, for anyone to have. But then, you know, the anxiety, the significant depression that stops from doing their day-to-day life, and post-traumatic stress disorder, or stress that's really debilitating, all need individual psychological or psychiatric support. The normal run-of-the-mill, geez, that was horrible, and I'm really scared, and I don't want to leave your mum, and I feel shaky, and it's a week after the bushfires, the floods, or the horrible event, you'd think, yeah, that's how I feel too. I reckon that's a pretty normal response to a difficult situation. If your child's still presenting that way 2 years down the track, you need someone who does that work specifically one-on-one. So we talk about a pyramid of intervention. So that psychological first aid I talked about is the big baseline. This is what everyone can get benefit from if they ask for it. We don't force it on anyone. Then the middle part of that triangle is the targeted intervention. I'm still a bit shaky, I can't sleep in my own bed, and I'm 18 and mum and dad are sick of me being in the bed with them because I take up too much room. That happens. They'd probably go to the top of the TP of the triangle if that's ongoing. That middle section is the group work we do in schools around Seasons for Growth, some of those programs. It can be a recovery group for young people. It can be setting up a youth group for affected young people who want to talk to other affected young people. But when it gets to the pointy end of this is really, you know, my kid was going along on this pathway, now they're going on this pathway and they're just not developing the way I would hope, they're not happy like I would hope, they're not coping like I'd hope, that's when you're looking at that individual intervention that's designed for them and what their concerns are. So we see anxiety as a consequence of a disastrous experience lots of times, lots and lots of it. And what you're talking about with the way you're seeing your kids post-COVID coming to school or kinder is a reflection of their levels of heightened anxiety. So where they used to get anxious when these things happen, but day to day their anxiety was down here, now it's sitting here, and it doesn't take much to trip them into I can't cope. So they don't change my routine. You know, I need to know what's happening. I need predictability. I can't tolerate different, is what they're saying, because different is way out there and it makes me feel really unsafe. So as you did beautifully by filming yourself, this is what we're going to do. They could see it, they could visualise it. You know, groups like Berry Street do a lot of great work with schools around this, and they do the Ministry of Silly Walks. Do you know the Monty Python Ministry of Silly Walks? So to get kids to transition from room to room in a way that they can tolerate the arousal they feel with a transition point, because their arousal's going crazy and they're not coping, they get a kid who will lead and gets to choose what sort of walk they're doing to go from A to B. So they can do a silly walk, you know, legs up, or you do this as you're walking or whatever. It's got a bodily component to it, and we'll talk about that, I hope, in a minute, but it helps reduce and dampen that arousal level. So physical activity, when you're anxious, can be very soothing, or it can make your heart race and make you feel more anxious. So there's no sort of recipe. This will work for everyone. And in all your work with your children and your support of your children, you have to match their need. So I can talk to you about trauma-focused CBT, or what sort of psychoanalytic work you could do, or EMDR, for example, is another intervention, but it has to match the client, the child, the need each time. So as a parent with a child who experiences anxiety at an uncomfortable level, like I get very anxious going to the dentist, but I can tolerate it. But if I felt like that all the time, I'd go mental. I'd hate it, because it really makes me feel sick. And I've got strategies to help myself with that. For a child who has anxiety and is dealing with all the other things in life that young people deal with, it's that their switch is always up here. They can lose it. They can withdraw. They can become argumentative and angry. They can burst into tears really easily and not get control back. You think about a 2-year-old having a tantrum in the supermarket. That can happen at any age when you lose control, and that's a mortifying experience, especially when you become older, because you expect to be able to control your feelings. You can go to a quiet place and do it, but when they're out of control, that's mortifying as well. So anxiety related to disasters is very similar to generalised anxiety, and it often is that you really struggle to dampen arousal levels down to a sustainable and manageable level. So we will get to the body stuff, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to that.
I have noticed a couple of things that have been said that I can relate to, and it's things like the cognitive impairment post an anxious or an event that causes anxiety. That's one of the things that's new for our daughter. Just trying to learn how to help her, regulate her emotions, I guess, in the face of disasters that she's not necessarily directly impacted by, but indirectly she's got a very keen eye for, everything going on around her and how other people are feeling affected, what's happened to them. As much, you can only close so much out. They still see, hear, even, without access to social media and things. It's everywhere. It's very difficult. And that there has been a question that's come to mind just since thinking about this. When there's a significant event, even on the weekend or yesterday, I think it was the bus crash. So a bus crash will be something that now triggers her. There seems to have been a few bus crashes. And
there has.
And she catches a bus to and from school every day. So, we're trying to not have the news on when she's in the room or something like that, but to sort of, I guess, shield her. But then it begs the question, we can only shield her so much. And so how do we broach, or support her so that when she is confronted by those things that aren't necessarily happening to her, but she feels like they could happen to her or they're happening to other people, and she becomes anxious because she doesn't like to see that that's happening to others.
So I might generalise it instead of talking about your daughter in particular.
Yeah, correct.
I'm very mindful of her right to privacy around this, and so it's something that I see commonly. And once you are anxious about feeling unsafe and something has happened, perhaps to create that sense of not being safe in the world, you just get antenna that pick up on every other example of how the world's not a safe place. There's a lovely children's book called The Big Bag of Woes. And it's like you say, well, there was a bus crash. That just proves the world's not safe. Oh, there was a stabbing in Sydney. In fact, it was in a shopping centre. Oh, well, that's another example. And you collect the examples. You're right, as a parent, as an educator, as a concerned adult, you can't protect children from hearing and seeing, and they can have vicarious trauma from hearing about these things. You know, it's not like you experienced it directly, but your mind went through what if that was me? What if it was my mum and dad that got stabbed at the shopping centre? What if? More feelings of I can't control my safety in the world and the people that I love. Our fear for people that we love is really significant. And sometimes children will say to me, I wish it was me. I would have coped better than mum and dad are. I know children often shield their parents and try to protect them, particularly that sort of 8 to 15, 16 age group who will say to me, Michelle, I'm really struggling, but I can't let mum and dad know because they're not doing too well and it'll bring them undone if they know I'm not coping. So I'm looking after the family. You know, mum can't make a sandwich at the moment, so I'm going to the supermarket and I'm making the sandwich. So, and my little sister, mum can't control her, so I'm stepping in to help there. So you get that parent behaviour in the child. So we won't talk anymore about your specific situation other than to say anxiety is treatable. It takes matching the child's needs to the therapy, and that in disasters it's quite common to feel anxious and still have a good outcome, because being anxious about your experience, an incredibly stressful experience, is what I consider a normal response. Where it tips into you need targeted individual or group support is where it's not resolving for you, and most of us get there in the end with our supports around us, but sometimes you need an additional dose of individual match to your need therapy, and it's when it really interferes with your ability to recover and function that I recommend that you do that. That's hard to tell with children sometimes. So it's looking at, are they growing and developing? Are they taking good risks, not bad risks? Are they individuating? Are they separating okay? Not crying for a very long time, where mostly your experience has been by the 6th month of the year. Children are used to the pattern of I get dropped off, I get picked up, and so on. So that's when you're actually thinking there's a bit of a concern here and we need to address it specifically along the way. The other thing we've seen in kinder age children when there's been scary events, and I think about the Manresa kindergarten siege a long time ago now, where children were held hostage at kinder. Horrible thought, absolutely. And those children, when they had recovered, were very caring, incredibly caring, maybe overly caring, to the point that if someone else in the grade was crying, it made them feel upset and anxious and heightened again. So they would go over and soothe them very quickly. So their tolerance for distress had dropped a lot, and they were, all those antennae, very potentiated, very ready to switch over to, oh my goodness, let's stop that because it makes me feel terrible, and very aware of other people's distress and pain. Yeah, so.
I'm Jo. I'm a crossing supervisor, lollipop lady, and that was my first driver for coming tonight, because in the possibility that we do have a community disaster, I meet with the children every day and I need to communicate with them appropriately, and so I wanted to learn that. Prior to that, what we were talking about is that I was a myotherapist for 38 years, and I was involved in research projects involved for my association and the health funds about some of the chemical effects of physical therapy, particularly, and a lot of the studies that were done were post traumatic disasters like Katrina was started, where they were doing blood tests on children post-trauma and then post-physical therapy, and analysing it down over several months and seeing how things like cortisol levels decreased, serotonin levels increased, and how the untreated parts of the population were still having high levels of these anxiety chemicals in their bloodstream. And so through all that, not just particularly related to massage, but through that they developed, PTSD programs that initialised using somatic therapies, which is physical therapies, to address these high levels of PTSD and trauma, to enable people to be in a position then to go to the more cognitive psychological therapies effectively. Yeah.
And that was very exciting to have that conversation when I came in tonight, because children carry a lot of their stress and distress in their bodies. And there's a very famous book called The Body Keeps Score, and it does. We know that. Think about yourself. When you're really tense and anxious and you're clenching and you're holding yourself tight, at the end of the day, you're sore. You know, you've carried that tension. When we talk about cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone, you know, it promotes that fight or flight. I'm ready to do what I need to do to survive. And always being in survival mode is exhausting. You know, you don't have the energy for all the other things that you need to do in your life. So I've read the research over the years that says that massage can be more effective than therapy at the right time. It's a good therapy, it's a bodily therapy, it's a good touch for people, not an uncomfortable touch. So again, some people don't like to be touched by other people, so you have to match to the person. Going for a run, some people find it burns off the cortisol, it helps. You know, it gets it out. Some people journal and they find that really interestingly and helpful along the way, because they get some insight and some reflection, but they also get it out and they don't carry it in their head all the time. We see children do a lot of drawing, and they will draw what was worrying them and what was the threat. And then that allows you to speak with them. And I brought some examples. You know, this book's been around for a long time. You can just download it off the web. Really helpful to have in relief centres, and is often in the relief centre. So Red Cross got me to put this book together in 2009. It was a weekend, quick, let's get this work done so we could get it in. But it allows children to tell their story, and it also allows them to be distracted if that's what they need to do with activities, to think about what they did, how they do it differently, what's tough about it. And it's designed so that adults can sit alongside children and hear their story and then work out what's the worst moment for them and how can I help them with that. There's some other great books that we were talking about, Leah and I, the Birdie's Tree series, which you can download or you can buy, written by some lovely people in Queensland who are now going around to disaster-affected preschools and libraries and working with parents and children and educators. It's a story of Birdie, and there's a Mr. Frog. And if ever you happen to be in a Zoom meeting with me, you'll see I've got Birdie and Mr. Frog in my office with me. It's a story about how Birdie manages challenges. So don't forget that it's for little people, it's designed for little people. So Birdie can be frightened. Birdie always has a strategy or is shared, someone shares a strategy with her that can help her manage the situation and feel better about it, or who she can ask for assistance from. So we're giving little children knowledge, coping strategies, agency, what can I do? And we're giving them an opportunity to be in a group where they hear how other people are experiencing it and what ideas are. The parents or teachers that are with the kids also pick up on other ideas. So that's Birdie and the Flood. This is the pandemic one, around the virus. This is the storm one. There's a whole lot of different disasters. I chose the three that I thought our communities have been experiencing recently. And just this year I was part of a group and we put out a book for older children, the maybe 8 to 12-year-old children, based on exposure to bushfire smoke and the actions that they can take to reduce their exposures to potentially harmful smoke. And when we did do it, I did it in conjunction with the School of Islamic Studies at ANU, and so we've got books that are in Persian as well. So they're reversible because we were looking to provide information to different cultures as well. in a disaster context. So books about disasters that are well written, not frightening, but are informative and give good answers around what you can do and what's helpful, is a really good way of helping children to start to feel like they've got strategies, they've got agency, they know who to ask for help, what they can do themselves. There is a Birdie's book full of relaxation activities. So the somatic, we bring in the somatic where we can with children and young children, so that we are doing more to equip children with strategies for themselves, to support as well the parents and the carers of those kids, because if we get the adults grounded enough and coping enough, that has a positive flow on for the children. You can make a reasonable judgment of how a child's likely to recover based on how the parents are coping at that point in time. So you'll find that most people like me will work with the child and the parents or the adults that care for them. And if I can shore up educators and help them understand, be well enough themselves to manage and tolerate distressed children when they themselves are feeling distressed, then I can set up an environment that's more proactive and helpful for those children. So I had this whole lot of key messages that I wanted you to take away. I'm aware of the time. Thanks. Hurry, hurry, people need to get home. So I'm going to briefly run through what the key messages are that I'd like you to take away. So the first message is that some kids and adults do fine for a few years and then they struggle. So not everyone's going to show high levels of distress immediately. Families that you think are coping may find that they run out of their coping resources 2 years, 3 years down the track and need support. As educators, and people who work with children in particular, we always have to have the curious question in our mind about what set this off? Why has this child changed? Why is this parent who was a very coping parent now struggling? Was it the floods? Was it the fire? Was it that they witnessed something horrible that nobody knows about? When I train other psychologists and social workers, speech therapists, occupational therapists, I say, when you're collecting a background history about that child or that adult, do you ask what their exposure has been over the years to really distressing events? Because it helps us understand what's going on. So you can be really super upset right at the beginning, or you can be super calm and coping, and it can change. And with support and connection and understanding, we can often get people back on track. Not always, but mostly. Next key message. Not all children will need counselling when they experience a disaster. I always cringe when the news says, and counselling was provided. Counselling is available. People don't need counselling the day after their house is burnt down. They need support. They need this sort of support. They need neighbours that are supportive. Down the track, they might need counselling. So remember that triangle I spoke about. Counselling's in that second and third tier. It's not in that first tier. Most people get on top of it with support. Now it varies when you read it, but anything from 20% to 4% go on to need significant mental health intervention. That means about 80% do it tough for a while but get okay eventually. Education centres such as early learning centres, schools and clubs can do a lot to help children learn about disasters and to recover well. The Scout movement, I'm aware, is looking, if they haven't already done it, to get a badge in their Scouts for knowing how to manage and do tasks within an emergency. How do I take good proactive action? What do I do? So we're looking at giving kids opportunity like that disaster resilience education that I spoke about. And of course, underpinning all of this is preparedness for the kids, for the families, for the schools, that we have a plan A, we have a plan B, and everyone understands and has contributed to that plan. That's what makes it a good plan and a likely plan to have a good outcome around mental health as well as physical safety. Another key message, children often recover better if they're an active part of rebuilding, planning, family discussions, and can contribute to the repair, rebuild, response and recovery. We come back to, as adults, we tend to try and shelter and protect kids to the point that they actually don't have enough information to manage. And so you don't get them to do things that are beyond their capacity, but you invite them and walk alongside them as they learn of what we can do. And remember my 3-year-old who was so proud of the fact they rolled good sausages at the door and the smoke didn't come in. Children often show their distress by their behaviour, developmental changes, body aches and pains and sickness. That's that whole body listening again. Listen to what they're telling you and watch what they're telling you with their bodies. Ask the question, you're holding your tummy, is your tummy sore? Why do you think it might be? Are you worrying about something? What's your worry? What is that? You know, where do you think that's come from? Talk about it. Explore it with them and then talk about strategies to help them so that you're teaching them the coping skills. Next key message, the most important thing for a child's wellbeing is that the parents look after themselves and then they look after their relationship with each other next. Because when your world's already crazy and falling apart, to have mum and dad falling apart and their relationship under so much pressure you worry that they're not going to be together, how are you going to manage your own recovery in that context? If you're working as an educator or a recovery person or a lollipop lady, then you're having the conversations when you see that there's a risk and you're helping to address it, or you're referring to where those people can get help. That is a big one for teachers and parents, I know, and they often feel like then I have to mask how I'm feeling. Kids have the best detector of when people aren't being authentic and honest, and if they can't trust their parents to be honest, who can they trust? So honesty at a right developmental level is always the best policy. Next key message, you don't have to have all the answers. You're not going to have all the answers, and you can build the plane while you're flying it, because often that's what you have to do in a disaster. But you have some ground rules and some understandings, and you know where you can go to get more information or more help about stuff. And you can honestly say to kids, I don't know the answer to that, let's see if we can find out together. And then you're modelling help seeking or inquiry or curious questioning or problem solving. Next key message, and I think you've got this one, infants can experience fear responses in a disaster and can develop traumatic stress reactions, and so can unborn babies. So we have to look after the whole life continuum in our work. Next key message, being together through tough times can be protective and it can help kids. So think about those Cyclone Tracy kids who didn't do as well when they were separated compared to the kids who stayed with family. That was protective in and of itself. Key message, include your children in planning and recovery. Use child voice in your community plan that you're doing. Have a focus group with young people. You know, Bryony's research can indicate to us that children as young as 8 can make informed contribution around planning. You know, that 8 to 12 is a gorgeous age for them knowing what needs to happen from their perspective. And plan and prepare yourself and your family and your schools and your learning centres, both physically and psychologically. I love your example of filming the evacuation process and then showing the kids. They had a chance to psychologically rehearse. They knew what was going to happen. They'd seen it happen. They had a go at doing it. Some found it really stressy. But if you were to follow up and rehearse it time and time again, eventually it would become routine, and the sting in the tail, the frightening bit, wouldn't be as frightening. So that rehearsal is really helpful around that. Yeah. Social stories have an element of that, yeah.
Is that what they call social stories?
Social stories are a bit different, but it has the same element of being able to see the progression of what happens and understanding it and talking it through and being able to predict the sequence, yeah. So that rehearsal and psychological planning and thinking it through is really helpful. You know, not if you don't have solutions, if you're only thinking about the catastrophes, that's not helpful. But if you're thinking it through with someone alongside who can say, have you thought about trying this? What if you did this? In our family, we're going to do this. In our household plan, we thought we'd do this. But if that didn't work, then I'd try this. So that's a rehearsal. Yeah, thank you. So last thing, core things that you need to have if you're going to do work in this area: care, compassion, safety and understand that it's physical and psychological, predictability and encouraging not routines but predictability, and they're different, I think. You're never going to get back after a disaster to the routine that you had before because things have changed and you've changed. But knowing predictability of Jo's on the crossing every day and she'll say high five as I walk past or whatever, then that's an element of I know what this next bit of my day is going to be. Listening, honesty, help seeking and connection, because connection's probably our superpower when it comes to a disaster or when we're feeling frightened. Done. Any questions?
I've got one, Michelle. Back to your key message around self-care for adults and keeping ourselves well. We have people in our community who have experienced trauma, whether it be bushfire, floods, storms, pandemic, or other traumatic events. How can parents stop or prevent generational trauma passing on to their children?
Oh, can parents prevent is more the question, I think. So it's a really interesting area of research, and there is some evidence that intergenerational transmission of trauma is genetic. How do you change your genes? I would say that if you can do the best you can to avert a trauma response, and I spoke about how important and helpful it is to de-escalate the arousal, you've got a better chance of not passing on your trauma responses. We talk about community level transmission as well, and it's very hard to live in the Macedon Ranges and not know the history of Ash Wednesday, that Black Saturday was coming this way, that there were the Lancefield fires, there were the floods, there were the storms. You know, I don't know about you, but when the wind's at a certain tempo outside my bedroom window, I think about the big tree that might fall on my roof. And I remember the storms that were so catastrophic in this area, and I feel a bit scared about that. But I also think, well, what's my likelihood? What would I do? So I've got strategies around that. So communities as a whole can carry the collective trauma and pass it on. You can pass on the positive messages around. When Ash Wednesday happened, our community did this. When the Black Saturday fires were coming, we had this level of preparedness. My rule of thumb is that you don't talk about the impending catastrophe or the catastrophe that's been without adding and what were the things that we could do and did do that helped us. Not pie in the sky stuff, realistic, because feeling stuck with a problem is a horrible feeling and it undermines our well-being enormously. So the best you can do is to try and resolve those feelings before they become deeply embedded and part of your genetic makeup.
It's about mental health.
And self-care. And self-care, I was in a meeting today and we were talking about moving away from using the term self-care because it puts the onus on the individual, and to talk about well-being. And well-being is everyone's responsibility, individual and collective. And we know when we're not doing as well as we'd like, and we probably know what the things are that we should be doing to help ourselves, and it's when we're least likely to reach out or do those things. And so it's having a buddy nearby to say, I see you're struggling, have you thought about going and having a massage? Or, you know, would you like to go and catch up with your friends on the weekend? Or would you like me to take you here? Or shall we go for a walk? Or let's do that meditation that worked so well last time, or the box breathing that works well, or, you know. So it's a individual, group, community thing, well-being.
I also think that there's been a generational shift. I know in dealing with depression and anxiety, which, you know, I've had to deal with, they started asking questions about my father. And old Fred was never depressed or anxious. He just spent all his time down the garage and we never saw him. But he was right. And I hope, come to realise that he probably wasn't all right. And so the way you then communicate with, children that we spoke about who were born in the floods, they were twin boys. Well, my communication with them about anxiety and depression is very different to Fred's conversation with me. Yeah. And I think that sort of thing is going to, and the general public awareness now of, you've got footballers taking a week off because, yes. My goodness, that never happened 20 years ago. So all these things are changing, and I think they're great steps forward when it comes to, breaking down generational anxiety. Just an observation.
Of it too.
Transmission
that's right.
of it.
I think that's a really good point. Thanks for that. And I think the notion of removing the stigma, normalising struggles, knowing when a struggle is more than a struggle and it's a risk to your life, and knowing what to do to help someone if they're at that point, knowing that we've got lots of resources around, perhaps not as many as we wish, but more than we used to. In 1983, with the Ash Wednesday bushfires, there were 10 papers in the world that mentioned children in the same context as disasters. 10. In the whole world. Now I would say there'd be 10 trillion. There are so many, and still not enough research. Like, we know we need to move it down to infants more, and we're working on that for sure. So community understanding is so much greater than it was. Community help is so much greater within communities. Look at this. This would have never happened before, that people would come together to talk about children and their needs in a disaster. So things are amazingly better than they were. We just have to keep on messaging and making sure people understand there's something we can do about this. We can be proactive. We don't have to wait for the harm to be so bad that we can't fix it. So keep that preparedness message going, keep that help-seeking message, keep that children have a right to be heard and supported message going, and things will get even better.
Thank you. Any more questions? Just as we wrap up, I'd like to thank Michelle for coming along tonight and sharing her wisdom. And I'd like to thank our VCC colleagues who have come along to share their time with us as well, and our AV people here who have so kindly come along to film us so that we can share Michelle's knowledge with the rest of the community. Last of all, I'd really like to thank everybody who came tonight. It's not an easy topic to come and talk about on a night. People are quite happy to not think about it until perhaps it's on their doorstep, that children are impacted and do suffer at times. And so I would like to thank everyone who came out tonight to share this experience with us all. Drive safely home, and please grab a bite to eat on your way out, because there's still plenty of food there.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much.